yourself, Lisa?
Okay, I should be unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. First of all, I want to thank you, Sarah, for that nice Devar Torah. It was particularly meaningful for me because about 20 years ago, I started studying, Bill and I, with a rabbi and attending services. And I was in a kind of a crisis in my life, having been the president of our federation up north and having been the president of our Reformed temple up north. I was very involved in Judaism, but I was struggling at that point in time to find God, to find meaning, a meaningful relationship with God. And through studying with the rabbi and having lots of conversations with my husband, we made the choice to become kosher. This is after our children had left the home, although we always kept what I call kosher style, which the rabbi would say, of course, is not kosher. But nonetheless, it propelled us to make this choice, and it has been so meaningful for me. So thank you, Sarah and Rabbi, for bringing us to this way of life. It has brought great intention to the way we live, a lot of beauty and grace. And so I just wanted to connect with what you said about the Devar Torah. Now, let me tell you a little bit more about myself professionally. Okay, you guys, it's not moving. Unbelievable. Do I have to stop share right now, or I keep on sharing? Because it's not moving my screen. Unbelievable. Why doesn't it move?
We see your cursor. There you go. You did it.
It wouldn't move by the arrows, but I'll use the cursor. So professionally, I am also a registered licensed occupational therapist. I've worked in several different positions, but probably the most formal was as the head of the occupational therapy department of neurology and neurosurgery at the University of Illinois Medical Center in Chicago. And when I became married and had my children, I also started teaching many levels of classes on health and illness. And so I come from a language and a perspective of health and living healthfully. Then I, living where the University of Illinois is, couldn't resist getting another degree and have a master's in counseling psychology. And at that time I focused on what I would call the sandwich generation. It would have to be a keto sandwich, you understand. But the sandwich generation being the adults who are caring for children in their homes and for older parents. So enough of that. I think you might want to know, and I certainly want to share with you, why I became keto and why I brought keto into our home. About 2.5 years ago, our daughter-in-law told us that she had an extremely rare form of cancer, uterine cancer. And her physician at Mayo said he had only seen maybe 5 other cases in his entire practice, and they were all women who were postmenopausal. At this point in time, my daughter-in-law had a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old at home. So she and my son both are very physical. My daughter-in-law is a dancer. And so they've always been interested in eating and living healthfully as well. And she discovered keto as a way to try to reduce the sugar that enters the body, because it has been shown with some cancers that sugar feeds cancer. So she started doing that. We could see a dramatic change in them the first time we visited them. And I was compelled to really join them as a sense of camaraderie-ship. But also I thought, so what would be so bad if I lost a few pounds? So I started really with that. It wasn't, it took a lot of reading and a lot of discovery to learn about it, but I just jumped right in, just like that. And it worked for me like that. So what is keto? What am I talking about? Keto refers to what other people call the ketogenic diet, sometimes initials KD. And so what does that mean? The ketogenic diet is a diet that is really high in fat, moderate in protein, and low in carbohydrates. And it is that diet which causes ketones, which are produced in the liver, to shift the body's metabolism away from a glucose metabolism and towards fat utilization. That's why people lose weight when they take on this diet, because even though they are eating fat in a way maybe they've never done before, it's the body that metabolizes the fat so that you are using up your own body stores. You could also find this diet referred to as a low carb diet, or LCHF, standing for low carb, high fat. So I will encourage you as we go along in this, that if you are interested, to do your research and look up online. There's a plethora of information, sometimes contradictory, but that's how it is on the wild, wild west of Google. So in this last piece of this screen, you'll see that the diet is really pretty specific, but there can be ranges. So I would eat a diet that's low in carbohydrates. So this 10 is how many carbs I would have in a day, as in terms of the balance of the diet. I would eat about a moderate to small amount of protein and the highest amount in fats. So when I first started doing this, it was almost impossible to get to those fats and make that work. And I think it's helpful if you understand a little bit about where this diet comes from. This is not just a fad diet, although there are people out there who like to call it a fad diet. In 1911, two physicians in Paris discovered that a starvation diet would help treat children with epilepsy. A couple of physicians in Harvard picked up on that, and then some physicians in Mayo Clinic, and they began this treatment of epilepsy for children that was formalized in 1920. Now, the Epilepsy Center organization and the Charlie organization are two very well-respected organizations. You can find out more about the diet simply by going there, but I'll show you many other options to look at as we go along. Now, many of you will remember that in the 1960s, President Eisenhower had a heart attack, and it's really stunned our nation. At the time, I learned that the stock market plummeted because the president had a heart attack. And the doctors were propelled to try to find out what was the cause of the heart attack and what could we do to make it better. And Dr. Ansel Keys pushed very strongly for a low-fat diet to reduce heart attacks. And even at the time, there were voices that felt that that was not correct. But he was very powerful and persuasive, and he got the food industry and the American Heart Association and many other organizations behind him. And so our whole food industry started to develop foods promoting a low-fat diet. And often, as you probably already know, many of these foods are laced with a lot of sugars. There used to be high fructose corn syrup in almost any product you would pick up, but now they're moving away from that and just adding sugars of different types. Still sugar. the processed, and instead of using the dietary fat that that is promoted in this diet and that our country was used to eating, from meat and butter and full fat milks, etc. It was, the whole industry came up, was just developed in order to have vegetable oils that would minimize the high fat that the doctors thought were affecting our diet. So you can see here a list of oils that now we understand have trans fats and that they damage our health. I'll talk a little bit about that later, so hold your question on that for the time being. But many of these foods are just in all of our diets. They're in cookies, they're in crackers, they're in sauces, they're even in French fries. I mean, these oils combined with the sugars are what has contributed terribly to this incredible record-breaking weight gain that people across the country and the world are facing. This huge increase of diabetes, type 2, huge increase of arterial sclerosis. So the big debate out there, it used to be that we would say calorie in, calorie out, what you eat, you have to burn up. And now the idea is that really obesity comes from hormones or from insulin, and from what triggers insulin. And what triggers insulin is sugar. So there's been a lot of resistance from the medical community over the years, but now there is more and more professionals, physicians that are looking at this diet and finding that it makes a lot of sense as a big push to reduce the diseases that go along with this. So, so in this diet, we eat fat to lose fat. And you're like, we eat fat to lose fat? It's called becoming fat adapted. So normally, a typical diet is a high carbohydrate diet. And the body uses glucose as a main form of energy. And by lowering the intake of carbs, the body is induced into a state of ketosis. And ketosis is the natural process the body goes to that helps us to survive when intake is low. So ancestrally, when hunters would be out there, they may not eat for days at a time, but they'd have lots of energy. And what happens is that the ketones break down fats in the liver and give energy. But that really goes beyond our perspective here. The goal here is that a properly maintained keto diet forces us into this metabolic state. So we don't do this through starvation like the hunters of yore, but we starve ourselves of carbohydrates, essentially. So we eat more fat and we eat fewer carbohydrates. And that's the simplest way of putting what this diet is all about. And what happens is that we begin to burn ketones as our primary energy source, and that is called becoming fat adapted. So being in ketosis means your body's burning more fat for fuel rather than glucose. And glucose is the easiest way for our body to get energy. And it will choose glucose over any other form for energy. And insulin is produced to process the glucose in our bloodstream, and it takes it all through the body. Insulin resistance occurs when the system gets too much glucose, and the pancreas makes more and more insulin to try to compensate for these increased levels of glucose. And because the glucose is being used as the primary energy source, fats aren't needed, and therefore they are stored. So when you are on a keto diet, you reduce the production of glucose, which comes from the carbohydrates and sugar, that your body typically uses for energy. But when it's starved of the carbohydrates, then the body turns to using the ketones, which comes from the dietary and the stored fat, for fuel. That is called fat burning. That fat burning state is called ketosis. And that's why people have such dramatic results in losing weight on this diet. But is it all about weight loss? Well, there have been lots of studies that look at this in terms of its appetite suppressing effects. But what I'd like to say is that there are many other advantages to the keto diet besides just weight loss, although with weight loss is fantastic for those people who need that. It works, as we noticed right in the beginning, as a treatment for those with epilepsy. But it also helps a person lean towards adopting a healthy lifestyle, not just losing weight. So it becomes almost a sense of quality of life. It promotes clean eating and avoiding inflammatory foods. So there's a sense of mindfulness about keeping keto. It's similar to keeping kosher in that sense of mindfulness. I've become very centered about how I approach eating. So the benefits of the keto diet are weight loss, the anti-inflammatory effects, lowered blood sugar, A1C, that's the long-term blood sugar, triglycerides, and your LDL, the bad, what is that called? Cholesterol decreases, and the HDL, the good cholesterol, increases. It's just fantastic. It gives more energy. I feel like when I am fully in the keto diet, that you could like take me off the ceiling. I have so much energy. So the metabolism of it is amazing. It changes the whole body composition and physical performance for those who are athletically minded, and lots of side effects. I had acid reflux. For me, it's been reduced almost entirely. I personally am not aware of having it anymore. Some people suffer migraines. They find that this diet helps relieve that. It gives this incredible sense of mental alertness and helps one focus. And that sense, remember if you have, a big bowl of pasta for lunch, how you might just conk out afterwards because you kind of get into this brain fog. I know that I've been put to sleep literally after eating lunch filled with carbs, but this reduces that and helps clarity. And some people even say that they feel less anxious and have more positive mental outlook. Leave that, everybody has their different responses, but those are some of the most well-known responses. I will tell you a little bit more about the details of it, but first, just let me say that when you switch over, some people can do it like right away, depending upon how clean or dirty their diet was to begin with. But some people get what's called the keto flu. And in the keto flu, because, I guess I would like to also say that it can take usually up to about 3 weeks of eating a keto diet to really fully shift into ketosis. And ketosis is this metabolic state, which I described, that is the goal of this diet. And so when you shift to a low carb diet, what happens as we start to utilize our fat rather than the glucose for fuel is that we are retaining less water. So as we excrete water, we also excrete some of the important minerals and the electrolytes that we need to function. Calcium, sodium, magnesium, chloride, and potassium are also excreted. And so I know you can't see this chart very clearly. I couldn't find a way to make it bigger, But I think what is important is that there are different symptoms that you can experience and different treatments, and finding that balance between sodium and magnesium and potassium, which you can get both from foods, but also from supplements, is an important factor. I take magnesium supplements. I take that at night. It also helps me sleep as a side effect. I'm very mindful about that. And I fortunately only had this little flu for about 2 or 3 days. Some people have it a little longer, but you do get past it if you stick with it. So what are we talking about in terms of our food? You undoubtedly have seen the USDA food pyramid. We have been encouraged, because the farming industry is so huge, to eat a lot of food with grains. The breads, the pastas, and potatoes are what we have been encouraged to eat the most of. Sorry. But not all fruits and vegetables are healthy on the keto diet because they have too much sugar in them. We'll get to that. The milk, cheese, and dairy, for those of you who are not Kol Israel, are a little bit easier. For those who are, you know where you need to go to get them. But the point is that instead of having low-fat, skim milk, low-fat cheeses, what those are foods that have been filled with actually more carbohydrates. And so what this diet encourages is that you eat the full-fat dairy products, and then 2 small servings of meat or fish on this typical diet, and limit the oils. So it's the tiniest amount, but to their credit, they also say we should limit sweets. I think that's a good point, no matter what. Now, let me show you what the keto diet looks like. On here, if you look at the big bottom of it, really this is what the diet is most utilizing. So all these really green vegetables, having lean meats, and let me say, Sarah, that if you see anything that doesn't look precisely kosher, it's because it's really hard to find these pyramids online and these kinds of things that don't also encourage products that we don't keep on a kosher diet. So there are very healthy fats and oils, which we can eat. You can see here that avocado and olive oil and coconut oil are some of the biggest and most accepted types of fats on this diet. Vegetables some are really high in carbs and some are lower in carbs. The pumpkin isn't so, where's my cursor? The pumpkin is, I would say, borderline, but all these other vegetables are very low in carbs. Eating full-fat dairy, as I mentioned before, dairy is, or did I say this? We use forget the skim, forget the 2%, forget the half and half cream. Now you have the opportunity to really enjoy the deliciousness of full-fat cheeses. And then here on top of this pyramid, you'll see that the fruits that we can have really are just berries, because they are high in nutrition and low in sugar, and compared to most fruits, and seeds and nuts. So you can see that the pyramids look different from one another. This is another way of looking at what we are supposed to avoid. If we look up here on top, you'll see that all the sugary alcoholic drinks, potatoes, and how many Jewish homes are loaded with potatoes, of course, processed foods, soda and juice, and legumes, including soy, and all types of sugar. Here, we'll talk a little bit more about vegetable oils, what the types that we don't want to be eating anymore. I mentioned it before, showed you the different types of oils that were created just for this industry, so that we wouldn't eat full fats foods. But anyway, you can also see that we're supposed to try to limit all these processed treats, which have all kinds of hydrogenated fats in them, which are really bad for us also, and grains. Now, this is hard for a lot of people, but is very doable. In terms of what we can drink, dry wines are acceptable on occasion, and of course, on Shabbat, we do have a glass of dry wine. In particular, spirits are discouraged because they can induce a glycemic response depending upon what it is. Coffee is accepted, as is tea, and water as much as possible. Coffee, as a matter of fact, will play a role, which we'll see a little later, because there's a famous coffee drink that is very big in the keto circles. So let me just tell you a little bit more about the hydrogenated vegetable oils. The problem is that they have trans fats, and trans fats we have found to be very unhealthy. Part of the problem is that plant oils are created with chemical solvents, and they go through tons of chemical processes to get them clean. So part of this way of thinking is to eat cleanly. And then other plant oils have high omega-C contents. I know that's taking us a little bit further afield, but the omegas can be inflammatory. So they say that the omega-3s are a little bit better, and you've probably heard that salmon, for example, is rich in omega-3s. So in order to reduce the risk of chronic inflammation and obesity, heart disease, and arthritis, and inflammatory bowel disease, this diet recommends not eating these inflammatory oils, because there is research that shows that it can contribute to that. So these oils, again, are really in a lot of processed foods, and so it's important to become,
hold on.
It's important to become Can you hear me? Weird.
I unmuted you. I muted all because I heard talking. So when I hear somebody making noise, I mute all, and then I have to unmute you. So it just takes a minute.
Okay. So we'll go on. All right, so the best cooking fats in the keto diet would be ghee. Sorry, don't look at that part. Sorry, Sarah, and anyone who keeps kosher. Coconut oil. So in my life, I use a lot of coconut oil, and I use ghee or clarified butter. I use down here coconut oil and avocado oil, macadamia, and olive oil, and a lot of butter for when I use dairy. The point in this particular screen is that some oils disintegrate and change with heat, and these are up here are the types of fats that do fine with heat. They don't change their form. They don't create mutants or carcinogens. But these are down here are more what we eat for light cooking, put on our salads for a quick little to cover some vegetables if we want. Now, what vegetables are high in carbs? Wouldn't you think, oh, if I'm a vegetarian, I can do just fine. I'll just eat vegetables. But vegetables have a tremendous amount of carbs. And so these show you the vegetables that are really high in carbs. In particular, I don't know how well you can read this, but you'll see that they have both carbs and net carbs. And what happens on a chart like this is that you would subtract the fiber in whatever it is you're eating from the carb to get a net carb. So some people only count net carbs when they keep keto. And in the beginning, I think that's a really easy way to go. I think if their goal is to lose weight and they get stymied, then they need to not give themselves that little bit of a handicap and just count the carbs as they are. But here you can see corn, potato, pumpkin, squash, all these favorite foods are really very high in carb, and the keto diet eliminates those. The onion has a fair amount of carbs, but it's also pretty high in net carbs. So what I have found is that I used to buy the biggest, sweetest Vidalias I could find. Now I buy a sack of the smallest little onions I can find, and then I take a small onion and I cut it in half. And I use half an onion for what I used to use one huge or maybe two huge onions before. And it gives it just enough of the flavor without all those extra carbs. So there are workarounds for getting some of these things that you want in a keto diet. So artichokes are hugely high in fiber. Leeks are okay. As we come down the chart, these foods are easier and easier to eat in the keto world because they have fewer carbs and fewer net carbs. Now, I only put up one of these four because to show you that the most important vegetables we can eat are the low carb leafy green vegetables. You can see these show you the grams of how many carbs are in each serving. Now, what about fruit? We love fruit and we're healthy, but fruit is incredibly high in carbs. And this is a real game changer for people who love their fruit, especially the summer fruit that's available. But on my diet, if you remember, we talked about how many carbs you can have in the beginning, and really a diet will vary between maybe 20 and 30 carbs in a keto diet. Well, here's your carb limitation for the day, girls. 1 medium banana. So looking at all these fruits, you can see that they're loaded in carbs. They are verboten, really, on the keto diet. There are substitutes, and probably Bill and I have found that we eat berries quite a lot, and we try to even keep that to just a little handful because it's easy even to overeat those. We don't want that sugar in our life. So here are some of the low carb fruits. You can see that coconut has a fair amount of carbs, but the fat in it is perfect for this diet. Rhubarb is low in carbs. These fruits and vegetables as we go down are higher in carbs. And so I use lemons and limes for flavor because after all, you don't get that much. I use these fruits and vegetables, but these are the lowest carb of all the carb fruits and vegetables. So one learns to study how many carbs you can have on a diet. And there's a wonderful, there are many apps. I'm going to show you, give you the name of a couple of those apps you can use to help you in planning your diet as you go along. Nuts have become an important source of protein without having all the animal saturated fat. We do eat more saturated fat on this diet. That has been a point of contention on the face of things, but the medical world is re-looking how saturated fat affects us, and those who, and there are a lot of studies. I think the jury is leaning towards using more saturated fats, that they don't have the bad, I guess I'd say, impact that, and reputation that has the last 60 years has put on it. There are people, and what I can say about that, about saturated fats, is that for anybody who has medical conditions, one really has to work carefully with a physician, and not all physicians are going to be on board with this. So it's a delicate dance for some people. But just to say that these nuts are a wonderful source of protein and healthy fats, but then there are some like this cashew, which is really high and might have some other side effects. I know a lot of people in the vegetarian world like to use cashews for all kinds of, to make salad dressings out of them and all kinds of things. But in the keto world, not so much. Seeds are also brought into the diet as a form of nutrition. They're basically very low in carbs and can be eaten and used in ways in the keto diet that you may never have thought possible before. I'll just leave it at that because I just have a few more things I want to cover here. So the high fiber low carb foods are obviously going to be super good for us. Up here you'll see that wheat bran is on this, but it is not really a keto food. It's just on this to show you that there are a lot of carbs in wheat bran, and you can get your fiber in other ways through nuts and seeds and vegetables. So you might say, will I ever eat breads again or desserts? Because on the keto diet, you know, flour is not part of it. So the answer to that is yes, it's completely doable. And there are tons of recipes and websites to help you on your path. I bake keto bread about every other week in order to have beautiful keto challah, and it officially is not a challah for hamotzi, but Sarah, close your ears, we do it anyway. Okay, truth is out. But you can say a shehekiana, I think, for the keto, for the keto bread, if not the hamotzi. Now, not many prepared foods are out there, but there are more and more coming. Although even those need to be looked at carefully because sometimes they sneak in ingredients like cassava flours and different kinds of flours that really are very high in carbs. I think when one changes over to the keto diet and one tries to make breads and things, the mouthfeel is a little different. But really, if one is motivated for health reasons to maintain this diet, it is something that is easily accepted in a very short period of time. Leaving gluten and the gluten foods can be hard for people, there's no question. But there are, when you substitute with foods that are delicious and nutritious and you know you're getting wonderful health results, then it's all worth it. And so the main flours we use are almond and coconut flours, and there's a whole world of learning how to cook with that. And if we ever do Keto 201, I'll be happy to have a class on cooking and baking with these keto-friendly flours. Then there's a whole world of sweeteners and thickeners. I'm gonna post something on sweeteners in just a minute, not so much on thickeners, but there are many choices other than cornstarch, for example, to use as thickeners in sauces. So let's look at some of these sugars, because this is really helpful, I think, in understanding what we really should and shouldn't do, and speaks to the glycemic effect of sugars that we eat. Over here on the right are the things that are really high in sugar, high fructose, all of these, maple syrup, agave, even considered coconut sugar, while they have, and dates and honey. Oh my, honey, what do we do with honey for the holidays? There are substitutes. So while it gives us joy and pleasure, I know there are ways to get that same joy and pleasure through other foods. What happens when we eat these foods is that it kicks up our glycemic index so high, it stimulates insulin, and then we get into this insulin resistant phase of our metabolism stalling on us. These sugars over here, these are not so great. They're not the healthiest in the world. Mannitol and xylitol are some of the least friendly of the sugar alcohols. Sugar alcohols is the term used for products like Swerve that you may have seen, which isn't on this, made out of erythritol, monk fruit. If you can find a kosher, I think Garden of Eden makes a kosher variety. Xylitol is the only kosher for Passover sweetener that I have found, and with the hechsher, and so I use it sparingly because it does give you a little bit of a glycemic push on this. So sodas, of course. So for the keto diet, I don't know how well you can see this, but the best sweeteners you can use for when you start baking, as I mentioned before, Swerve, stevia, if you don't mind the aftertaste, monk fruit, and there are a couple others, but those are probably the most well-known ones. I just found liquid allulose in Walmart, of all places. It's kosher and a wonderful syrup form that can be flavored with whatever flavoring you want to put in it. So I can make my own maple syrup. I can make my own honey flavored syrups, which works for the high holidays. Down here are different kinds of sweeteners, which may also have a glycemic index push. So as you go down, they say to lower these more. And there's some other side effects of these sweeteners that make you want more sweet. It's a kind of an addictive thing that happens, that the more you eat it, the more you want it, and then you're kind of defeating the purpose of going on the keto diet. Just this shows you that glycemic index push. This maltodextrin and dextrose, which you see hidden in lots of things, including this up here. It's not in this picture, but it's in probably here. This has dextrose in it. Really gives you a huge glycemic index. So you have to read the labels carefully because you want it to be pure and not to have these things that give you this glycemic index push. These stevia, erythritol, monk fruit, and allulose are the most common of the sweeteners that are out there and available and that are kosher. And the others, these to me they're too chemically created, and I stay away from them whenever I can. So I've given you a lot of general information, but how do you start? Well, I suggest that you go online and read and do searches, keto diet, and I will give you a few of my favorite sites in just a second. But one of the first things that I and anyone who is a coach would encourage you to do is to purge your pantry. Don't try to start this diet and leave all these other foods in your pantry, because it's a really good way to get sidetracked and to fall off the wagon. I end up shopping on the outside of aisles. I buy lots of fresh fruits and vegetables that are high in high-fat foods. And very little on the inside of the aisles. And then we have to count our macros. So there are all kinds of counters and calculators and apps that do this. And these are 4 of the probably the most well-known apps that count your macros. And what that means is you put in your information, your age, how old you are, how much you weigh, and then you have it calculate what you can eat in terms of your fat levels and how many grams of fat, your protein, and lastly, your and so they're hugely helpful. And then it is most helpful to use these to enter your information so that, especially in the beginning when you're learning about it, you have a helper to show you that, oops, today I went way over my carbs. What can I do to make it better? Or, oh, I didn't even get near my protein that I wanted to get. And I'm way on the bottom with my fat. So I know that it is really hard in the very beginning to find that balance, and these tools are wonderful. Also, they're online. Are so many online diets and diet plans that if you are the kind of person that wants to have somebody take you day by day by day through what you can eat for every meal, you can find that out there. For me, because so many of them had trig, it wasn't really feasible, and I'm a very creative cook, so I wanted to do my own thing. But it is there for you if you're interested. I think what is also a lot of fun for me is going to the bloggers. So if I want to make, let's say, Indian food, I would go keto Indian food in a search, and up would come somebody like Headbanger over here, who is an Indian of descent, and does all kinds of great Indian foods. And you can do that for everything. I think that Num Num is the best baker out there. Low Carb Maven is delightful. But and you have to love some of the names of these places, you know, they're just hysterical. These are some of the oldest and most respected on top. And so let me just call attention to the dietdoctor.com, who is a physician. He is a nephrologist, and he uses this as his treatment modality, and he has a huge team with him, and you can buy into his program or you can do it free. And it is an excellent resource. I encourage you to look at his website to learn about it. There's tons of podcasts too that he has, and that everybody has really on learning more about it. Ruled.me is one of the first places I went to. I found it very helpful. I would get very distracted and I'd go away, I'd go to all the different links, but then I would come back, and it really helped me to understand more about the app and how it would work for me. So these are wonderful resources. Everybody, you would probably find your own that you love. So how do I start my day? I make bulletproof coffee. Maybe you've heard of bulletproof coffee. Here they use a ground coffee. I happen to use Nespresso, but first I take my mug, and I put in a spoonful of coconut milk, which is really coconut, like a fat, or it's high in fat is what I'd say. And then I put a good dollop, like a tablespoon of full fat cream, no half and half. And I mix in that a little bit of something that is similar to this Brain Octane. This is his particular name brand. And his Brain Octane, I don't think is kosher. So I find MCT powder. This is an MCT oil. And what I just wanted to say briefly is that the MCT oil is more common, but for me, it gives me stomach upset. And so I immediately found that the powder was much easier on my system. And so I use that. It is, almost all of them are dairy products of the types that I've found that are kosher. And so I only use it for when I'm doing dairy. Now that works because I'm having coffee with dairy. Some people actually put butter into their coffee. And let me tell you, I did this at the very beginning with my son, who, you know, helped us when we got started. And it was shocking and shockingly delicious, but weird. So I stopped using butter. But the point of this is that you start your day with as much fat as you can. It powers up your brain cells. I typically don't eat until lunch or early afternoon after having 1 or 2 coffees. But what does a typical day of food look like? So people will start with a bulletproof coffee, and okay, you know, it's really hard to not have tray fun here, but so just blank out the fact, Sarah and anyone else that might be offended, unless I made this myself, and I didn't. I went online and freely took from all the images that are out there. The point being that protein and eggs are a wonderful powerhouse way to start your day. And if that doesn't suit you, then having bulletproof coffee, as I just mentioned, or even a yogurt or mock oatmeal, or there's so many other types of breakfast foods that are available. Sometimes I have cottage cheese and a little soft-boiled egg, and I'm good to go. But as I said before, I'm often not eating breakfast. For lunch, okay, here we go again. The problem with keto and doing this in a Jewish context is that you're going to see cheese with meat. Now you can find kosher non-dairy cheeses that if you wanted to have this kind of effect, you could. I don't do that, but some people would. So this is just to show you that there are a huge amount of options for what you can eat, but typically what you're getting is protein and vegetables. And then there are keto desserts galore. I have become a proficient baker of keto desserts. I don't use sugar. I don't use flour. I use almond or coconut flour, heading more towards coconut because it's lower in carbs. And I use full fat in every case to create what I want. They are so satiating, the full fat, that you actually eat less. It is possible on a keto diet to eat more fat than your body can really use. And what happens with that is that then you don't lose weight. Then you start, you know, adding fat, too much fat to your diet. So finding that happy balance is really the object. What are some quick snacks? Avocados, hard-boiled eggs. I'm going to skip over the obvious trafe. I make keto crackers. I make keto cereal all the time for us, for my husband in particular. Having here, they say peanut butter, although really in the keto world, even peanut butter is not considered so healthy because it is a legume after all, and legumes are considered higher in carbs. But almond butter is the most used other type of snack or protein for people. Just having antipasti or taking some meat that you have and rolling it up in a lettuce leaf is a wonderful way to have a sandwich without having a sandwich. Online, you can find a ton of dinners that are already there. You don't really have to think about it. It's all there for you if you just search. I really only put this there to show you that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. But what is really important is to learn how to swap out your foods. And this is a tiny list. I got the smallest list I could find just to make the point, that what do we do instead of rice often is we use cauliflower rice. It's become very popular and very accessible in the grocery stores of late. Instead of pasta, you use spiralized veggies. Instead of mashed potatoes, you go back to cauliflower and you make a cauliflower mash. Although you can make a mash out of rutabagas, or I made a celery root mash the other day that was delicious. Instead of flour tortillas, you can use the lettuce wrap, as I just suggested. There are low carb wraps, but they still have carbs in them. A lettuce wrap will reduce that. There's no more French fries, because not only is it potato, but it's usually a very high inflammatory oil. And so you can take zucchini or jicama and almost any vegetable and make a kind of fry out of it. There's a lot of recipes out there on how to do that. If you happen to have an air fryer, I like to coat my vegetables with oil and put it in the air fryer, and I get the perfect fry. Kale chips, I'm sure you've heard of, instead of potato chips, almond and coconut flour, and instead of juice and soda, of course. Make your own infused water. I do that all the time with lemon and ginger and mint and all kinds of things like that. One last look at a way of eating that's really encouraged in this, although not strictly just keto, but it is a way so that you allow the insulin in your body to stop producing, and that's to rest your digestive system. So what people do is they eat for 8 hours and they fast for 16 hours. You'd almost think the table would be switched over, but the point being that some people stop eating, let's say at 8 o'clock at night, which is maybe late for some people, but in the summer, that's how it often is for us, and then don't eat until maybe 12 or 1 or 2. And that is typically what I do. What this does is it really gives the glucose a chance to stop producing. It reduces something called insulin resistance, allowing our body to metabolize well, reduces the liver fat. I could go into all these things and dive a lot deeper. I don't really mean to spend much time on this. I find that it gives me a wonderful improved sleep as well, and because I have less food in my body. I have a whole bunch of resources here, which I can forward to you if you want. I keep all kinds of books on this that helped me, inspired me to learn about it. My first keto book that my son gave me was by Mark Sisson, and he is an athlete, and he does all these products which unfortunately are not kosher, the primal source products. And this, if anybody wants this resource or any of this, I'd be happy to send it. I can do that, send it to either you directly or to send it to Sarah. And let me just finish with my connection. Sarah brought in to mind how important it is for us to care for our body and our soul. And I found that keeping kosher really helped me to be mindful and to bring God into my life. And so when I think about Hashem having that support, I really am careful about not only what I put in my mouth, but what comes out of my mouth, to be a kinder person and caring. It's been my kind of MO anyway, but it's just another kind of way of looking at it. So it is my connection. Keeping kosher tunes me in spiritually, and keeping keto keeps me so healthy, so energized, so tuned up physically. And so I keep kosher keto every day and for all the Jewish holidays. And you know our connection with God is symbolized with rainbows. So this is out my door that I see. Actually, while we were speaking, there was a small rainbow. I just love that. I meant to share also earlier that Bill and I have had such fantastic results. We've each lost between 15 and 20 pounds. Bill's A1C, which is the long-term sugar, has plummeted. He's no longer considered diabetic or pre-diabetic. His blood pressure went down. There are so many potential health options or results, I guess I'd say, to this diet. But here, I really mean to point out that this is a very centering diet. It connects me also to my Judaism through all these reasons. And so if you have any other questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Thank you, Lisa. That was awesome. Really so informative. You touched on so many topics. Let's give her a round of applause.
Well, I just hope it helped you to get a little bit better understanding of how it can help you in so many ways.